Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BFI Film Academy's June Lab. My name is Alex, and I'm the Film Academy's Festival and Events Manager. And today's the second session in a two-part series all about screenwriting. In our May lab, we talked about how to develop and structure your idea into a winning short film script. And it was in conversation with the award-winning screenwriter and director, Sarah Cleft. And if you haven't seen that lab, I urge you to watch it. It's available on the BFI YouTube channel for free. And we'll post the link to it in the chat box shortly. And it's a really, really, really nice companion to today's masterclass. So the masterclass today will focus on the importance of genre for short film. It will be delivered by Gabriella Apicella, who's a freelance writer, tutor, and also BFI Film Academy script doctor. But before I introduce you to Gabriella, I want to tell you first a bit about how the session today will be structured. So some of our Film Academy team are working behind the scenes today on this event with me. My colleague Kia, who said hello to you guys in the chat box already, will be managing that chat box throughout the session. So if you have any questions for us about BFI Film Academy, or more generic labs questions, please feel free to ask us, and Kia will be answering those questions for you. But please make sure that you select all panelists and attendees, otherwise not everyone will see your message. If you do decide to use the chat box, please be respectful to Gabriella today, but also to each other. Please don't use offensive language, and please don't share personal information. For those of you who've missed it, the link to our code of conduct can be found in that ticketing email that was sent to you by Eventbrite. If you would like to network with each other, we've set up a Facebook networking group for you guys to do just that. And Kia, again, will share the link in the chat box. Feel free to join that group and talk to each other. And then if you have any questions for Gabriella today, so questions about genre in short films, questions about screenwriting, then please put those questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screens. And my colleague Ria will be managing that box throughout, and we'll devote the last 15 minutes of today's session to your questions, and we'll try to get through as many of them as we can. And just to also let you know that today's session is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the BFI YouTube channel later on this week. So with that, I will hand over to Gabs to talk to you about genre in screenwriting. Welcome, Gabs, and enjoy the session.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Gabriella. I can be found often at the BFI labs that are held on site at the South Bank. So if you do pop along with any questions on screenplay, if you've got a script, if you've got a couple of pages, then me or my colleague Teresa, who hosted the previous lab, are happy to read those things just on the spot, and then we can give you some feedback. And if you've even just got a question generically about screenwriting, then we can try and give you a hand with that if you're wondering how to start and just at the beginning of things. So you can find us there. Thank you to the team for obviously inviting me today. We were having a think about the things that might be useful for those of you who are interested in screenwriting for short film to know about. And one of the kind of major factors that I think can sometimes be a little bit of an afterthought when we're making short films or thinking about making short films is the idea of genre. So genre is incredibly important, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions around it and some ideas about how it might be in any way sort of restrictive to your idea, when actually it's a massively helpful tool to get an identity within the industry. I'm expecting that those of you who are thinking about making short film is because you're sort of in it for the long haul, you're wanting to have a career in the film industry, and you want to create a sense of identity and your unique voice. In order to do that, genre can be incredibly helpful. I'm going to take us back quite a long way in time to the very beginning. And I'm going to talk about feature films, because assuming that you want to work in the film industry, assuming that you want this to be your career, then feature films are going to have a bearing on the practices of feature films and classic Hollywood practices are going to have some kind of impact on your identity and on your work in the film industry in the Western world. So I'm going to talk about the very beginnings of the film industry. And I'm going to talk about the 4 major studios that were dominating the industry from the very, very beginning. There definitely are others that were smaller, but the big 4 were those that you can see on your screen. So 20th Century Fox, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Paramount, and Warner Brothers. Obviously, they're not going to be unfamiliar names to you all, I expect, because they are still incredibly powerful organisations. Although, obviously, there have been a huge amount of changes in this time. But I am going to talk about the beginnings of Hollywood, and I'm going to sort of just give you as I hope, the reasons why, like where genre came from and why it has such a massive kind of impact, even to this day, on how the industry can work. So in the olden days of the Hollywood studio system, there used to be literally the studio system. And what would happen would be you would work for one of these studios or a studio, but let's say we're going to just focus on these 4. And it wasn't just that you worked for them, you were effectively owned by them. So if you were, let's say, a major star that was contracted to any of these studios, you could expect to see in your contract conditions that would state things kind of essentially meaning that you are not allowed to leave your house unless you look like a movie star. You would also find that you would be expected to go on certain dates with certain people. You may have to be seen in certain nightclubs and not seen in other certain nightclubs. Your every kind of movement really was not your own. Included within that, you never got a choice about what you might be working on, and this ran across all of it. So it ran across the writing and the directing and the producing, as well as the acting, and of course across all of the technicians. So these were incredibly restrictive contracts that people were under. Remember, this is a time when cinema was a really brand new thing, and I don't know how many of you might know about this, but at the beginning of what's called moving pictures, they would even be shown in like fairground sort of environment, in tents, and they very much did not have a good reputation. They were very films and any moving pictures were kind of frowned upon by like high society as this sort of freak show type thing, and that it would just pass and it would be a novelty, and it was disgusting, and it was vulgar, and all of this kind of thing. And so the studios were obviously trying out various tactics to make successful and profitable, ultimately, material. And they did that in a number of ways. One of the first things that began to happen was there would be a lot of adaptations of either very successful and classic novels and or theatre plays. So a lot of Shakespeare and, you know, some of the kind of more well-known novels, particularly in America, were made into films. And so that was an attempt to kind of capture a highbrow audience. As the studio system became more powerful and had been running for, let's say, 20 years or so, then each studio began to make a certain type of film, and they became aligned with a genre. And this was very much to do with attracting a certain audience. So at the same time as they were producing a lot of films, the studios actually owned the cinemas as well. There was legislation, thankfully, brought in so that there was going to be a bit more fair play going on. But at one point, they even owned the cinemas. So it would literally be like, we make the films, they go to our cinemas, and we know who our audiences were. So you can see like quite how heavily controlled it was. So as the studios began to grow in power and in popularity, and became much more sort of ordinary thing to regularly go to the cinema every week, if not more so, then these identities for each studio began to become apparent. So if we go to the next slide, with 20th Century Fox, they had a reputation for doing very high-end drama and musicals and westerns. So I'm going to just sort of be throwing film titles at you. If you don't know them, please look them up. If you do know them, please delight in the fact they've been mentioned. But some examples are things like Grapes of Wrath, All About Eve, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. These were glossy, beautiful, sophisticated films. If we go to the next slide, which was MGM, their sort of strap line, if you like, was, oh, we have more stars than the heavens. They were known for having some of the most powerful and influential film stars of all time contracted to them. Some of the films that you may be familiar with that MGM made was Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, Singing in the Rain, like massive, massive films. I mean, we're talking, you know, not far off 100 years ago now. I mean, in 1939 was Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. So we're definitely not that massively far away from that now in terms of it being 100 years. And, you know, these are still very much part of our vernacular. If we move on to the next slide, Warner Brothers, who were not doing as high budget things, but began to get a real reputation for crime, gangster, drama, as well as the odd screwball comedy. So Casablanca was a Warner Brothers movie. A Streetcar Named Desire, which was Marlon Brando's first major movie, was a Warner Brothers movie. Mildred Pierce, which was the film that demonstrated Joan Crawford as a dramatic actress, was a Warner Brothers movie. So they began to have their own very specific brand as well. And then we go to Paramount, which is on the next slide. They often did a lot of comedies. So It Happened One Night is an incredibly famous screwball comedy from that era, which won all of the major awards at the Academy Awards that year. His Girl Friday, again, a wonderful, very, very pacey, dialogue-led comedy with Rosalind Russell and Cary Grant. That was also a Paramount movie. But they also were known for allowing their directors a bit more freedom than the other studios did. And that was the studio that became home to Alfred Hitchcock, where he made Psycho, where he before then made Vertigo, and also where Billy Wilder made both Double Indemnity and Sunset Boulevard. Now, the way in which genre has then demonstrated itself as a useful thing for the studios to know, okay, we have writers that are associated with writing this genre. That is their craft, that is their skill. Equally, that is the same for the directors. Their kind of voice fits in with what our taste is, and the story material, but also the stars. So, you know, we often think, I mean, you may never have heard of him. I don't know how young all of you are on the other end of this, but somebody like Humphrey Bogart, who was just synonymous with crime drama and detective drama, he would never have even got a chance to do anything like a musical because it just simply wasn't being made at the studio that he worked in. So those kinds of typecasting became very, very entrenched. Now, whilst the studio system, thankfully, kind of fell apart dramatically throughout the 60s and the 70s, there remains a kind of attitude about how useful genre is in terms of an audience's reception and take up and involvement in whatever that film might be. So genre enables all the way through with the business strategy side of things, from financing all the way through to distribution, a sense of, oh, we know now how to market this, or we know how to fund this. We know the kinds of people that might be involved with this. It's something from the business side of things that is very, very instructive. And because when people are dealing with quite enormous amounts of money, they want to feel like they're making a safe investment. Genre has a huge, huge part in enabling the finance side of things to kind of feel like, okay, we understand what the likelihood of this film being successful is. So if you just, I mean, although we have moved on a lot from the studio system, as I said, nevertheless, there is a huge influence of genre on the way in which we consume films now. And if you just look at posters, if we go to the next slide, this is literally me doing a Google search. So if we look at the little section on the top right, that is a Google search for comedy film posters. On the top left, that's horror film posters. On the bottom right, we have sci-fi film posters. And on the bottom left, we have drama film posters. Now, hopefully, even though they're sort of tiny, tiny images, I'm hoping that what's coming across there is the fact that you've got very similar color palettes, even poses, often the same sort of fonts happening and the same kind of tone of images happening. Those things don't speak to the originality and the kind of trailblazing nature of some of the films that are in there, but it's literally reducing the whole complexity of that story right down to a single image that's going to attract an audience member into their cinema seat. So when we're talking about genre, it's because it is very, very useful as a marketing tool. Now, one of the misconceptions about genre, of course, and I completely appreciate this as a writer myself, is that people worry about it becoming something that's reductive and that's going to be a kind of paint by numbers thing and that's going to hinder their imagination. In fact, genre works in the opposite way. And what we're trying to do as creatives is to use the tool of genre to amplify and elevate our own work. But we can't do that if we don't know about what the genre is. So when this comes into relevance for you as short filmmakers, is it can actually have a massive effect, even from the starting point, in terms of where your film might screen. So if we go to the next slide, please. Now, I've got just the three different genres here because drama tends to be accepted by virtually every single festival. But there's a kind of square there that's on the top left of the screen, which is showing you just, again, results from a Google search of horror film festivals. On the right-hand side, there's a block which is sci-fi film festivals, and then at the bottom you can see as comedy film festivals. These are all festivals that if you are making a short film that has a clear genre, whether it's one of those or another that you may be interested in, there is already an audience that is waiting for it. Now, when you're thinking on the festival circuit, how many submissions festivals receive from filmmakers, it's very helpful to hone down into actually where you're more likely to get a screening and where you're more likely to be successful. And genre is a very, very clear way to do that. I've spoken to a lot of people who have said, oh, but my film doesn't have a genre. It's suitable for everybody. If that is what you're thinking at the moment, again, I completely appreciate it. I said exactly the same thing myself when I was studying way back when, long time ago. And I was proved completely wrong by the fact that the very first film that I wrote, which was as part of my degree, I remember I got some really lovely interest from some quite interesting and moneyed studios or production companies rather, and they they liked my pitch, they liked my treatment, they liked my longer treatment, and then they got the script. And the issue was that they didn't know what genre it was. And from that point, bam, the wall comes down. And I was obviously very disappointed at the time. This happens a lot, by the way, as you go through one's career as a screenwriter. So it's just something you have to get used to. But it is about then understanding what the industry does with genre and why. Knowing about that, accepting that it needed to have a genre, can actually provide a framework for consistency so that I can communicate what my idea is in the script more effectively. So there are lots of people that have utilized genre within their careers, and it has enabled them, excuse me, to reach a great deal of success. We're going to talk about those in a minute, so we'll just stay on this slide for a little bit longer whilst I rabble on a little bit more in depth. What I would say to you as people who are learning and who are kind of going into your careers in these early short film stages is that if you can identify what your genre is, then it's going to provide a way for you to be more extreme in that area. It's going to enable you to be more defined about what it is that your film is actually about and what it is that you're trying to communicate. It may also demonstrate, and probably will demonstrate, the amount that you know about filmmaking technique. There are certain kind of tools that are used by filmmakers working in different genres, and you're able to do, like, you know, kind of pastiches and homages to and references to in a way that can be very, very satisfying for people to understand through a film festival environment and think, this person really knows their stuff actually. So it's something that, again, enables people to feel like you are skilled at what you're doing and they're in safe hands and they trust you as a storyteller to take them on a satisfying journey. What can happen if we have something that doesn't fit into a clear genre is that then it kind of lacks a sense of place. And how do we screen this? How do we program this? Where could it fit? Another thing I should just make sort of passing reference to, having been involved in running a festival in my past, is that it's definitely a thing that when you're programming a festival, you are looking to have a really exciting program for your audience. And where it may be that you've got specifically quite dramatic, serious, intense material, if you get a film that comes along that's a really strong genre film, like a horror movie or a comedy or a sci-fi or something like that, or an action movie, it suddenly is like, oh yes, this is going to be really exciting for our program. And it's a very attractive thing as a film festival producer to see something that has a strong genre basis. So it's about getting your work elevated and seen, and into in front of the audiences that are going to then appreciate and honour your work. Also, just to say that when we're looking at what the purpose of the whole short film circuit is, surely it is then to make the next film. So there's a progression going on there as well, and there's a kind of honing of one's voice and identifying what kinds of films it is that you like. We also know that, obviously, first and foremost, we're all viewers, we're all audience members, and there's definitely nights where we sit down in front of the TV and we think, okay, what kind of movie do I want to watch right now? And yes, we all like multiple genres, but identifying how it is that an audience may come to your film and what you want them to feel from it is something that we're very good at when we're an audience member, and we can tend to lose sight of when we're a filmmaker. film is ultimately a communication between the filmmaker and the audience, and we must never lose sight of the audience experience, because they're the ones that we're trying to communicate our vision with and what it is that we're trying to say with our films. So thinking about how they're going to receive that information, how you're going to make them feel, is absolutely vital, and genre is also a huge part of that. I'm going to move on to talk about some filmmakers who have employed genre very, very effectively in their short film careers and have gone on to massive success. So I'm very, very fortunate that I have at various points kind of met and known and in some cases worked with these people, and they are all four of them utterly fabulous, and deserve every single beautiful thing that's happening to them right now. So if we go to the next slide, please. This wonderful person is Pranay Bailey Bond. Pranay is a horror filmmaker, and I came to know her some time ago. She was originally doing a lot of music videos, but always with something sinister, something strange going on. It took her a little while to really kind of go, yes, I'm horror film. That is my thing, because I think we all worry about shutting off avenues, and actually what happens is that if you can be more specific, you're actually going to be on a clearer journey. Now, some time ago, when Kickstarter was still, well, it wasn't in it. I think it was a few years going, I think, Kickstarter, but Pranay launched a campaign for Nasty, which is her short film, which, as you can see from the caption there, screened at over 100 film festivals internationally, which is quite a big deal. Yes, there are lots of film festivals, there are lots of horror film festivals, but getting into them is you know, and to the extent that Pranay did, to the enormous success that she did, is quite something. It's quite an incredible achievement, and she won a hell of a lot of those awards as well. Now, Nasty is set in the 1980s, and it is about a little boy who finds a video nasty. You may or may not know about the kind of legend of video nasties within the 80s. I am old enough to have lived that period. And there was this idea that if you were watching really explicit and violent material on videotape, and seeing it multiple times, that it could somehow turn you into a crazy killer. And these films began to be banned, and there was a sort of black market for some of the scariest films. And there was a whole load of kind of moral outrage and people wanting to blame violent acts that people had done in reality on films. So Pranay is very interested in that whole era, and that is, you know, the era that her feature film project was based on. But she didn't do the thing of making a short version of her feature film. What she did was looked at the themes, looked at the environment, the time period, and crucially, some of the devices that she would like to have used in her feature film, and employed them in Nasty. So it was a demonstration that she understands how to handle these themes and how to handle this world very, very effectively, and crucially, the technical side of it as well. And if we go to the next slide, she went on to make Censor, which is fabulous, and came out last year. I believe you can watch it on streaming now. And it is about a film censor whose job is to watch all of these horrible video nasties that were coming out in the 80s. And it's what it does to her mind. And it is fantastic. As you can see, I'm not the only one that found it fantastic. Mark Kermode gave it 5 stars. Hooray, well deserved. And obviously that kind of appreciation is something that, you know, every filmmaker would want to have, you know, a 5-star review from the country's most prominent film critic. So that was, you know, a wonderful, wonderful success. It also did wonderfully well at festivals. It got audiences awards. It premiered at Sundance. You know, Pranay's done fantastically well with it. And of course, as is completely right, she is now moving on to her next projects, which are also horror projects. So it's the journey through the short film has enabled her to kind of position herself very, very clearly in terms of what she wants her career to look like. If we go on to the next slide, please. Oh, yep, sorry, I forgot about that one. That's a lovely, lovely shot of Mark Kermode wearing the Girls on Top's t-shirt that says Pranay Bailey Bond on it. Hooray, we love that. So yeah, next slide, please. Okay, this is another wonderful human being, Kate Herron. Now, Kate Herron was making some really fantastic short films for quite some time. Her film Rest Stop, which is the image I've got here, and which is available to watch in full on Vimeo. She got a number of awards for, including Best Comedy Short. And it's one of the films that really identified her specific ability to find humour and compassion and strangeness in the everyday. Kate has a very distinctive voice, and as I say, that was kind of evolving through her material. She did another wonderful short just soon after Rest Up, I believe, and it was called Smear, which is hilarious, which is about getting a smear test, but it was a kind of monster horror comedy as well. But she's a really fun and very, very respectful and kind director and writer, who has just got this really lovely sense of humour. Another lovely film that she did was called Fangirl, I believe, about a boy band member who's kind of all grown up. She has, as I say, a really wonderfully humane, loving, and yet cutting and very, very funny perception on in the way in which she depicts things. So if we go to the next slide, Kate has gone on to direct half of the first series of Sex Education and more recently the first season of Loki. So Kate is doing astonishingly well. It's so well deserved. She brings this lovely humor and kind of collaborative, gentle but very, very precise vision to her work, and yeah, she's a joy, and it's just wonderful to see her thriving. Again, somebody who's tried out different kind of techniques within their short film and has got something that is quite unusual, but definitely still within the comedy genre, and has honed it through practice, through getting to know her craft, through getting to know her collaborators, and obviously is now achieving this superb success, which she so rightly deserves. Next slide, please. Lovely chap, Rob Savage. I'm hoping that some of you may have come across the articles whizzing around on socials last week about Rob's latest film, Dashcam, being banned by Cineworld. And if that doesn't make you want to see it, I don't know what does. Rob is by no means come out of nowhere. He has been making short films for a long time, and in fact he made a feature film at just the age of 17, which he actually did win the BFI award for best new film, or best debut film, I believe it was. And yeah, at the sickeningly young age of 17, he's an incredibly talented filmmaker. But the interesting thing about what he did after his first feature, as I say, which won the best debut at BFI's, was that he was kind of realizing that he didn't want to put himself into the bracket of that genre, which is more drama, and that he wanted to pursue what he really loves, which is horror. And so as time passed, he he chose projects that he could bring a horror slant to, and again have all been very rooted in a kind of reality as well, a sort of skewed reality. One of the most successful films that he had in festivals was this one that I've got an image of here, Dawn of the Deaf, which, yes, it's zombies, but it's also obviously depicting people who experience deafness, and it's very, very clever how it brings those two elements together. And how it plays with the genre conventions. This is a really important thing about genre. As I say, when people worry that it's going to in any way be reductive on their idea, or it's anyway going to take some originality out, it's actually, if you know the genres really well, it enables you to bring in a new slant and originality, because your perspective on how that genre might affect your work is going to enliven it, it's going to amplify it. Dawn of the Deaf did incredibly well. It was at Sundance, it was at London Film Festival, it was at a number of different festivals around the world, as I said, over 100 or so. And Rob, as I say, has gone on to, if we go to next slide, yes, Dashcam has just come out on Friday. If you're in London, I believe it's at the Prince Charles Cinema, and it's also streaming at the moment, although according to Rob's Instagram post the other day, you're meant to see it with a crowd, and if you're over 18, then drunk. The other film that Rob made, and certainly where Dashcam kind of came from in a sense, in a being financed sense, was that Rob made Host. Host was on Shudder in 2020. Definitely the scariest way to watch Host is on your laptop, because it all takes place over Zoom, and Rob actually directed it over Zoom. And in fact, none of the people that were in it actually were in the same room together until long afterwards, because we were all in lockdown. It is an astonishing feat of achievement to have been done under those kind of circumstances. And to be honest, even if it wasn't done under those circumstances, it's highly enjoyable, and it has got some really great scares in it. And again, it has demonstrated that Rob is capable of handling quite unusual material in a very realistic way, and that can really kind of get under people's skin. And it was the success and kind of, viral reaction to Host that led to him being given a 3-picture deal with Blumhouse. And as I understand it, again, from his Insta post the other day, is in the editing stages of the latest Stephen King movie. So again, Rob is doing incredibly well. And it's not necessarily even because his ideas kind of begin necessarily as horror. I mean, I feel like they definitely do now. But there may be a strangeness to things, but he's actually drawing on horror conventions as a filmmaker and bringing the horror out. So I think this is the principle that we're kind of thinking of, is like, actually, it's not about that you start with the genre. You start always with your idea and what it is that you want to say, but it's thinking, hang on a minute, what are the story elements that are primary here, and where does that fit across maybe similarities with films in a specific genre. Just as an example, a film that I'm currently writing has become a psychological horror. Psychological drama. I'm looking at horror, I'm thinking horror. A psychological drama, for the fact that the conventions of that genre fit alarmingly well with the very personal internal story that I'm trying to tell about the individual at the heart of it. That's the core protagonist. So it took quite a while for me to identify that, but it was a kind of circling round and kind of going, well, hang on, what is it I'm trying to say here? What is it I'm trying to get across to the audience? What is the viewpoint that I want them to have? What do I want them to feel? And actually, it was it was a kind of slow process of kind of going, hang on, yeah, that's definitely psychological drama. And it's much more, as I say, to do with the journey of the audience through the story that you're trying to tell. What is that emotional journey going to be? Do you want them to be super happy and laughing and kind of like, engaged in a sort of getting involved kind of way? Or is it, something that you want them to be kind of, I don't know, where they're having to kind of meditate on it and really absorb it in a slower kind of way? Or is it something where you want to have big jumps every now and again? There's all kinds of different experiences that we have in the cinema or watching films. And it's noticing that within yourself, and it's noticing then what the genres are that maybe actually have that impact on you as a viewer. There is so much subjectivity in this, and that's really important, because if we try and cater for everybody outside of ourselves, then what's going to happen is you're going to dilute your material down to its weakest elements. And actually, that subjectivity about where you can be really definite of, oh, I really love that, or oh, I really hate that, is going to provide you with a very clear sense of what you do or don't want to create. There's nothing wrong with those things. That's where your voice is. That's where your originality is. But the way that genre can help you is it can actually amplify some of those things. So, for example, in a real world setting, it may be, I don't know, let's say a drama about, I don't know, a marriage falling apart or something. And maybe it can be a lot of kind of arguing, or it can be a lot of, sort of backstabbing and gaslighting and this kind of thing. Let's take that into, I don't know, a comedy thing. And actually, you've got a lot of slapstick there. You've got a lot of kind of potential for dark comedy there. You've got good pranks that you can use there. If you're going to go in the horror section, for example, then you could get pretty violent and pretty horrible. If you're going to go into a sci-fi section, then perhaps maybe there's going to be something to do with, I don't know, some kind of strange technological advancement of like spyware and all of the kind of futuristic things that I don't know, where people kind of like have these crazy glasses I've heard about that coming out, where they can like film what they're seeing, what you're seeing, and then they can like search up stuff and become like a walking Terminator creature. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. I am rambling in that one, but I hope you know what I mean. I'm sort of going, you know what I mean? I can't see any of your faces. But I'm hoping that it's kind of coming across in that any scenario that you come up with, if you put a genre on it, it's going to elevate it into a certain direction, which may bring out some of the themes, some of the ideas that you're thinking about in a more defined and clear way for your audience to engage with. Okay, that's a long old ramble. I'm going to go on to the next phenomenal person, please, Nathan Bryan. Now, Nathan is all kinds of things. He's one of these incredibly multi-talented people. I used to see him around a lot. He used to come to a lot of the BFI Feature Film events, and I used to see him around here and there, and he did this hilarious short film, which is very short, for random acts, which you'll get the link to in a bit, which is called something like Nice Unicorn Bruv or Cool Unicorn Bruv, but it's just super funny, and I've used it a lot as I was teaching as well when it first came out. Now, Nathan, as somebody who's not just a performer, but also directs and also writes, has been phenomenally successful. He, off the back of Random Acts, which of course means that you get a television broadcast, he managed to make so many wonderful connections that recognised his talent and his ability. And if you go to the next slide, please, it wasn't enough to just put on his just one or two pictures. He's got multiple books, children's books, which are wonderful and inspiring, and multiple works on television as well, both as a performer and as a writer. And he's again, like the other three, just a very humble, good person along with it, who, and I believe recently he hosted the talk actually at the BFI television festival where with Lenny Henry. He's a very, very personable person. He's very approachable, he's very charismatic and very funny, but very honest and kind as well. And I think that's the other thing that really, when I was putting this presentation together, and it was just sort of really lovely to see that these people who are doing so well and have actually honed their voice and their vision through the use of genre are actually all just very clever, but also very, very lovely people, and all of them kind of championing their colleagues and their collaborators all of the time. So that's always a beautiful thing to see, and kind of what we always want more of in the industry. So yeah, I think the resource slide is next. I'm happy to have that on whilst I ramble on a little bit more. Oh no, we've got some more. I thought we were going straight to the resource side. This was me being not looking back at my own PDF here. So yes, so we're thinking about how we can employ genre devices and be successful at short film festivals. Another thing I should say, apart from having a clear genre, is that if your film is between 10 to 15 minutes or less, as is the case with every single one of the ones that I've mentioned so far, then it's far more likely to get programmed. Again, in film festivals, people are looking to have a vibrant, dynamic program of films, and that 10 to 15 minutes is much, much, much easier to program than something that's like 20, 25 minutes. So being really precise and being really honed and clear is absolutely vital. As I say, having a clear genre is going to enable your work to just stand out that little bit more. It will give you a clearer voice and it will give you a clearer identity. The reason that's important is going to be about getting your next projects made. The clearer you are as a filmmaker in terms of what it is that you're trying to achieve, the more that the investors, the audience, the distributors are going to have a sense that you've got an audience and they know how to find it. Their job is how to find it. Your job is about how to hone your voice. And at the beginning stages, we simply haven't got all of those tools yet. So it's a journey, it's learning, and it's going through kind of what is it I want to say? How do I want to say it? Who do I want to speak to? If we go on to the next slide, please. So yeah, it's really important to know why genre is helpful. What I would say is please do, don't just kind of like think, oh, okay, we did that one session with BFI on YouTube. Now I know everything about genre. I mean, I am a big rambler. I am not the definitive answer to genre. There are books, there are YouTube documentaries, there are all kinds of different resources about genre. Now, what I would say is to find out about the history of it, find out about the genre that you're interested in. And if you're not sure which genre you're interested in, then simply reflecting on the kinds of films that you like, because presumably, you're wanting to make a film that you would want to watch, right? So you've got to be thinking, okay, well, what is it that I like about films? What is it that I'm interested in about films? And thinking about how it is that those things work. I know some years ago now when I was writing a horror film, and it was when I first started watching horror films, because I was always a big scaredy cat when I was a kid. And I caught up with a whole load of them. And it wasn't about trying to emulate them or do the same things or have the same scares. It was figuring out how they worked and figuring out how they achieved the scares in them. And that's fascinating. That's going to enable you to learn about pacing. It's going to help you learn about characterization. It's going to help you learn about dialogue. And it is important to kind of then become an expert in whatever genre it is you're going to be working in. Just tool yourself up, essentially. You're not expected to have all of the answers to all of these things right now. It's a journey. you know, so it's kind of just responding to where your natural inclinations are. And that's something as well that I think is really admirable about the four people that I've spoken about today, is that they've enabled themselves to find out. They've kind of gone, oh, I think I do this. Oh no, hang on, no, that's not quite right. I think actually, no, I'm going to try this now. That's all okay. You've got to be free with yourself to find out as a creative person and as an artist, rather than deciding right now, first film, I know exactly who I am. I mean, you know, you're going to grow, you're going to change, whether we want to or not. We all do. So knowing about genre, knowing about its place in the industry. Knowing about the kinds of things that are going around in the industry in terms of what's doing well and what's not, that's also really super helpful. Not because you're going to do the same thing, but because you're going to approach those things with insight and knowledge and use them to your advantage. As if you are going to proceed and then make a genre film, be really clear about what genre it is you're going to make, and as I said, become an expert. Crucially, let it be something that elevates your unique vision rather than something that stomps it out. It's about using, you know, these things to our advantage. That's what any learning about filmmaking is. Sorry about the very loud motorbike that's now going past my window. I hope that didn't disrupt too much. So yeah, it's about using the conventions, whatever they are in filmmaking, to enable you to tell the best story that you can. So yeah, if we go to the final slide now, please. So yeah, please do check out those films on Vimeo. I think it's just a trailer for Nasty, but the other ones are there in full otherwise, and certainly do check out the full length material in television, books and film that all of those makers have made, because they're fantastic humans and fantastic filmmakers. I think that's kind of it, and I think I can see there's questions. I can see like the chat's going, it's like distractingly mad, so I'm a little bit like, oh, we better get some questions going. Is that okay?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Gabs, for that. Yeah, the questions are starting to come in. Please, guys, feel free to still submit questions. We have 15 minutes to answer all of them. So yeah, there's still time to get your questions answered. But I'll start, Gabs, with a question for Tom. He's asked, what can you do with a project that doesn't quite fit into a genre? So sometimes a dark psychological thriller can be hard to place, as he's personally finding out.
Yeah, it can. I mean, the thing is it's about the themes, right? It's about what it is that you want to say and what you want the audience response to be. Because even the same story can be made into different genres. The thing that will happen is that the emphasis on what the filmmaker is trying to do with that is going to change radically according to what genre it is, I would argue, and the kind of treatment that you give it. Because, you know, in some senses, you know, if you apply, like, for example, if you're going to do something that's a psychological drama, then it's a very internal story, but it's also about an unreliable narrator. It's about a mystery to a certain extent and information being hidden. And that's quite a suspenseful journey for the audience to take. So it's knowing how to craft that, and looking to the kinds of films that have made you feel, you know, that same sense of intensity and suspense and edge of your seat stuff, and kind of going, okay, well, how have they done that? Has that been, you know, a music choice? Has that been, you know, to do with subtext? Has that been to do because they withheld that bit of information from me until this point, and then I didn't understand until later? You know, so we're really trying to deconstruct. I think, you know, there's something about writing specifically that people feel like they've sort of got to, I don't know, like kind of in a mystical way, like have just been given it, like a a superpower, and it's like, no, you just work it out. You know, like it feels like, really, I don't know, it can feel a little bit kind of it can feel a little bit arduous to sort of feel like you've got to actually unpick like the details of it. But essentially that's what you're doing, is any film that you're watching, you've got to like look under the car bonnet and go, well, how did that work? What did they do there? And it means rewatching stuff. It means rewinding. It means looking at like what the, you know, the time, like the amount of time that's passed, you know, like 10 minutes into a movie before like this thing happens, or kind of going, oh, by this time in the movie I've like stopped caring about that character. Well, okay, well, why did that happen and how did that happen? Or why am I so interested in this character and it's only been going for 3 minutes? What is it about them? Like, stop it. How did I care about this character now?
Thank you. And something quite similar from Lucy. How do you make a decision if you're torn between two genres for a project? Is it just pick one and see how it fits?
It might be. I mean, it's really difficult without knowing the specifics of each project. But I would always say it's to do with how that's going to affect what it is that your film's actually about. That's going to be the bar that you measure everything by. It's like, what do you want your audience to come out of this with? What do you want them to understand about it? And crucially, how do you want them to feel when they, you know, when they've stopped watching your film? And that's, you know, if you know that, if you know what your film's about, you know what you're trying to say, you know how you want your audience to feel, then those are going to be really, really useful guides towards making the other decisions.
Thank you. And from William, as someone who works in animation, I often find that animation is categorized, for example, on Netflix, as if it is a genre.
Right.
You agree, I assume?
I agree. It's a big problem.
Are there any ways that you think that he could use this assumption when making films to his advantage?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, it depends how subversive you want to be, I suppose. I mean, you know, on Wednesday, we've got a screening of Flea down at my local cinema. There's like a documentary club. And I mean, obviously that is animation, but it is also a documentary, and it is also, as I believe, it's going to make me cry. Yeah, I mean, it's mad, isn't it? And I think definitely, you know, that is something, but on the other hand, once you start talking to animation producers, they're very much going to start talking about tone and genre and targeting it in those similar sort of ways. If it's short film, I mean, again, obviously, you know, there's a whole area of like experimental film, which, you know, doesn't rely on a traditional narrative structure. But at the same time, people are always going to be interested in this thing of like, what is the tone of it? And is it, you know, I mean, if it's not suitable for children, I mean, that's obviously the big thing that happens with animation. Oh, it's a kid's film. And it's like, no, Team America is really not a kid's film. So, yeah, it's like, you know, you've got to kind of, you're still going to come to that point of genre within that, I would say.
And question from Sebastian. Would you say the more flashy genres, such as horror or sci-fi, give you an advantage in getting noticed, as opposed to genres which are more subtle?
I think they probably do, because I think it's about within the festival circuit, it's about the originality of seeing them. Because on the festival circuit, so much of stuff is a drama, and often it's social realist drama as well, because understandably it's cheaper, and it's, you know, it's more accessible. It's what I made when I was making short film most of the time, was social realist drama, for exactly those reasons. But also those things were, you know, those issues, the things that I was covering were very important to me. They were part of my daily life. But in fact, I actually stopped deliberately doing social drama because I knew I didn't want to become a writer of that genre. And I deliberately started doing horror, dystopia, sci-fi, bit of black comedy in order to diversify, so that I wouldn't get pigeonholed, because I could see it was going to happen. And I think that, and I think that that's also a reason why those films, probably did better at festivals as well.
And what are your thoughts, and this is from Sophia, by the way, what are your thoughts on thrillers as a genre? It seems like pure thrillers are less popular today. Is there space for them in getting funding and good festival runs?
I mean, I think that the difficult thing with the thriller, I mean, if you say thriller, the first thing comes into my head is like Bourne Identity, right? And I'm just like thinking, God, that's expensive. Because it's car chases and it's locations and it's running around. You know what I mean? So I think this is also why I think horror and comedy are very popular, because, you can do horror on very, very low budget and you can do comedy on very, very low budget. There's different elements that you have to spend a lot of money on, i.e. horror, sound, comedy, actors, and script, and that's not to say that they don't all deserve to have lots of funding in all of those areas, but those are the things I think, with comedy particularly, the timing's so important, and you really do need actors that can do comedic timing, and with horror, even if you've got unprofessional actors, I mean, we've seen, look all the way back to like Blair Witch, and it's not to in any way denigrate it because it terrified everybody at the time, but obviously not a beautiful camera shot scenario, but it's the atmospherics, right?
And then what about experimental film? Somebody anonymous asked, are experimental films still worth it, or is it not as appreciated as a genre since it's less defined and voice is more vague?
You know what? I mean, I think it's really hard to say about what's kind of worth it, because ultimately it's about what your journey is. It's like saying, when somebody says that they're successful, it's like, well, what do you mean by that? Because success is, the way I define success is different to how somebody else might define success. So when I'm saying worth it, I think that's really difficult to say, because actually, the hope, I suppose, is always that people are going to see it, right? So that's the key. That's where, if it's about having your work seen and being able to make more work, then it's about finding your audience. And that's where genre helps. And within that, it may be that you're not looking straight to just film festivals. It may be that you're looking to art film festivals. Do you know what I mean? It may be that you're looking to gallery spaces. It may be that you're diversifying in terms of that environment of where your work is going. It may be, it may just be that it's you can go broader into different environments outside of film, because it's not just relating to film. Again, depending on what the specific project is. But I think, I think that regardless of the genre, we've still got to always come back to that same question of, what is it about? What are you trying to say? And who's it for? Do you know what I mean? Like what? Because that's the key thing, that even the most experimental films in the world, they still have to have a core to them that makes sense and that brings consistency together. Like, how do you want people to feel? You've got to know that. I remember when I was studying and we watched, I'm going to get in so much trouble now. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to go there. We watched a feature film. Please don't ask me to remember the name because I can't remember. It was a Jean-Luc Godard feature film, and it was a film that he made very late in his career. And the purpose of the film was to deconstruct like conventional narrative structure. Now, I can safely say he did that very, very thoroughly. We had images and sounds that did not relate to one another, that were followed and preceded by other images and sounds that didn't relate to one another, and it lasted for 2 hours. And I think all of us, I mean, we were just like that. And we kind of came out like all disoriented and like we'd been in a torture chamber or something. I mean, that's a horrible thing to say, but do you know what I mean? We were just so bamboozled by what we'd seen. We're like, I don't get it. I like, what have we just seen? Why have we? But that was the point. That was his point, is to deconstruct structure, like narrative structure. There was no narrative, none at all. Couldn't find it. Your brain was like madly, desperately trying. Was that the same voice I heard like 20 minutes ago that said something that didn't even make sense to this? But at least maybe it was the same something. And your brain was like going into overload, trying to do the thing that your brain does, which is making connections between, you know, disparate images and sounds. And it couldn't. And he completely destroyed it. And so we were all fried. We were just like, he had a point. I didn't like it, but he had a point.
So would you recommend that the audience go and watch it?
Again, I mean, it's like it had an audience, right? These things had an audience. 70s, everyone was bonkers over Godard, and it had an audience. And he, you know, had people queuing up around the block for it. Fair play. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's always going to be an audience, because people, if you've got something interesting to say, then people will want to hear it. The problem is that when people start and they don't know what they want to say.
Well, talking about not knowing what to say, another question for Sophia. How do you avoid cliches? Saying the same thing as everyone else when writing the final third of the screenplay. Our knowledge of genre can lead us to predictable endings. So how do you get out of those slumps?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard. It is hard because the thing is, I mean, I can only point you really in terms of like thinking through where it can go. I mean, for me, I would only ever, if it's feature film anyway, I would always know the ending before I know act two. I always do act one, then I work out act three, and then I work out act two. So I would always kind of have a sense of where I'm going to, because if you don't know that, then your act two can kind of go anywhere, and then you get a bit lost. So there's that. I would say go back to act one and think about what the film is about and what you want to say with it, because that's what act three will be. That would be one way to do it. The other thing, when it comes to things like, oh, if it's going to be the same as everybody else's, if it's what you truly believe, then no, it won't be, because no one will say it like you do, because your voice is your voice and no one can take that from you. And that's where all of our originality is in our own perceptions of the world. So no one else can tell the story the way that you can, even if it's on paper looks the same. You're bringing your own perceptions to it. So there's that. And I think that, yes, we have got, kind of tropes and conventions with genre, but it's, the ones that play with genre really well, that they do something really different with what the expectations are, and they turn them on their head. And that's because those people know the conventions of the genre. You can't turn it on its head if you don't know the genre. The other thing I'd say is a book that I always kind of tend to like signal people towards is by Linda Aronson, called 21st Century Screenplay. And what Linda talks about, which I really like, because there's lots of screenwriting books that go, well, you can't do voiceover and you can't do flashbacks. Well, clearly you can, because we've seen them and they work. So to say that you can't is a bit silly. And she's very permissive in her approach. She's like, you can do anything in film. That's why we love it, surely. So this is where it works, and this is where it doesn't have the same impact, and this is why, and she identifies it. But right up at the beginning, when she's talking about like idea generation, she says about the fact that the brain is a muscle. I was going to say the Brussels. the brain is a muscle, and therefore it likes repeated action, because that's what muscles do. They perform repeated action very well. And so your brain will naturally repeat back to you things that you've seen a lot of. But our job as a writer is to brainstorm beyond those things. And that's the hard bit, is that we will kind of go over and over, oh yeah, that's what needs to happen in a rom-com. That's what needs to happen in a horror. That's what should happen here. But actually those things are things that are going to be kind of, again, just a brain repeated action, rather than actually what your voice is and what your vision is. So we have to, a kind of duty, if you like, as a writer, to go beyond that and to brainstorm, and to know that the first things we're going to come up with are going to be repeated, and that's fine. That's not that we're rubbish. That's not that we're boring. It's just that we've seen a lot of films, which we should have done if we're going to study it. So you just kind of go, well, is that really what I want to say? Is that really what I want to say? But yeah, I would say, you know, in terms of like definitely deciding the third act, it's like go back to the first act and go, well, what do I want to say with this? You know, what, like with all of these kind of startings, you're essentially kind of mirroring it in Act 3, right? And that should then be clear what your film's about, hopefully.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. Thank you so much. And everyone, Zakia has posted a link to Linda's book that Gabs mentioned in the chat box if you want to check it out. And let's end on a more personal question. So, what has been?
You want me to get my cat, don't you? You want me to get my cat? He's fallen asleep.
You can get the cat and tell us also what has been your major struggle when entering screenwriting. So for you, what has been kind of like the most tricky thing to navigate?
Oh my God. Oh God, there's so much. Oh,
okay, pick
so much. Okay. I mean, I think in terms of like the thing that people, I guess, are surprised about when I talk, because I'm kind of like, when I'm teaching, I try and be very candid, because I don't really see the point in like mystique about these things. And I think the thing that is a continual struggle is the self-criticism. I don't have a lot, whilst I'm quite familiar with doing these sorts of things, I don't have a huge amount of confidence. And certainly when you're first writing, you know, it's the resilience that you need to keep going when all that's going on in your head is I'm shit. And that doesn't go. For me, it hasn't gone. And it's a fearful thing, and it stops me writing. And it's been a continual, ongoing journey of trying to find ways to keep that quiet so that I can write the thing that I want to write, but it doesn't go away. And so, like, for example, like last week, I just finished a draft, and I was so happy with it. I was just like, because I finally got to the end of this draft. Oh God, it's been taking me ages. And I just literally, like, it was a little bit embarrassing. I mean, I literally just like ran to the pub and had a half. It's so silly. And I was just so excited. But then like later that evening, it was like, oh God, but everything is a bit crap though. And you're going to have to go over it now, and you're going to have to work it out. And you're going to see that none of any of that draft is any good. And it's just like, you know, so I think everyone's a little bit oversensitive and neurotic and, you know, insecure. And I think I try and tell my students that, because I know I can see when they're feeling nervous and like not good enough. None of us feel good enough. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's a bonkers thing. It's a hard thing. And I always come back to this really lovely quote that I can never remember who the writer is, but and I really should look it up. But somebody who said, the successful writer is the writer who didn't give up.
Oh, what a lovely sentiment to end on. And thank you so much for sharing that. It's personal, but I think a lot of people in the audience will probably
I hope so, yeah. It's normal. The thing is to know it's normal. It's normal. We all feel like that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I'm sorry we're not able to get through more questions, but there is one that I just want to quickly mention. Somebody asked about pitching your ideas, and I wanted to just tell everyone that you and Teresa, our other script doctor, actually did a session on this last year in one of our labs, and I'm just going to post the link to it in the chat box now. So yeah, it was all about pitching developing short film ideas, but also how to pitch them and how to put a pitch deck together. So incredibly useful and practical session. It's available to watch for free on the BFI YouTube channel. So yeah, follow that link and give it a watch, because we could sit here for another hour talking about pitching and how to effectively present your ideas. But thank you so much, Gabs. That was really, really insightful.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who joined today, and thank you so much for all your questions. Before you go, we would love it if you could help us tell us what you thought of today's session by filling in a quick survey, 2-minute survey, just to let us know what you thought. Zakia will post the link to the survey in the chat box shortly. She's just done it. And you will also be emailed that survey link by Eventbrite. So yeah, if you could take a couple of minutes, that would be great. As I said in the beginning, the session today was recorded. So if you missed anything, if you want to watch it again, or to everyone who had problems with the link and joining the session today, I'm really sorry about that. You can watch the session in its entirety on the BFI YouTube channel. We'll be uploading it in the next few days, and we'll post in the Film Academy social channels as soon as it's up. So keep an eye out on our social channels, and that's what we'll be also announcing our July lab very soon. So yeah, thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Gabs, for such a great session. Have a lovely evening. And see you all in July. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.